Let's talk about President Trump's address to the nation this past Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. Towards the close, he said he believes God saved him to make America great again. And that got me to wondering, does Trump have a mandate from God?
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boy.
Welcome to Faith Check News, where we dig into the intersection of faith and today's headlines. And I know what a lot of you are thinking. With his brash personality and chaotic leadership, divisive rhetoric, how could God possibly be behind this man's rise? Well, let's faith check the Trump mandate through the lens of God's principles. Trump kicked things off with a bold statement, framing himself as a leader spared by divine intervention to usher in a new golden age.
I believe that my life was saved that day in Butler for a very good reason. I was saved by God to make America great again. I believe that.
He referenced moments like Butler, Pennsylvania, where he narrowly escaped an assassination attempt. He was grazed by a bullet and yet leaped up yelling, "Fight, fight, fight." That moment of uncommon valor was like a conversion on the road to the White House, where many critics turned Team MAGA. Come on, let's face it. It's kind of hard to deny that wasn't miraculous. But that doesn't automatically grant Trump a mandate. So let's step back and consider the state of the nation. Trust in institutions is at an all-time low. Gallup's 2024 trend shows Congress, the federal government, and mainstream media all suffering from plummeting public confidence. Meanwhile, 59% of Americans, according to a January 2025 Gallup survey, feel they're worse off post-Biden-Harris. The economic pain of the American middle class is real. The wealth gap has widened, while federal employees' median income rose 12% above inflation from 2020 to 2024. In contrast, the middle class wages have stagnated. Trump sees this, and he believes we can do better. A CBS News poll found that 68% of people agree and felt more hopeful after his recent speech. Is lifting despair and encouraging hope in line with God's will? Isaiah 1:17 calls us to defend justice and encourage the oppressed. Optimism isn't a sin. It's a biblical response to injustice. Next, let's look at Trump's electoral victory. He referred to his victory as a mandate like has not been seen in many decades.
The presidential election of November 5th was a mandate like has not been seen in many decades. We won all 7 swing states, giving us an electoral college victory of 312 votes.
Consider Trump's improbable political resurrection. In 2020, despite media and political elites branding him as unfit for office, a dictator, or even Hitler-esque, his vote totals continued to rise. 62.9 million in 2016, 74.2 million in 2020, and 77 million in 2024. It's historically unprecedented. His comeback defied all odds. Now, critics argue that Trump supporters make him godlike, but what if we flipped that around? What if denying God's role in Trump's rise actually gives Trump superhuman credit? Romans 13:1 says, "There is no authority except that which God has established." And John Lennox argues that God is sovereign over the affairs of men. He may allow rulers to rise, but they remain accountable to him. Rather than making Trump godlike, recognizing God's hand humbles our perspective. God is not obligated to choose or only allow perfect rulers, but he is still sovereign over the process and the outcomes of an administration. Let's turn now to Trump's economic policies. Maganomics is simple math.
If you don't make your product in America, however, under the Trump administration, you will pay a tariff, and in some cases, a rather large one. Other countries have used tariffs against us for decades, and now it's our turn to start using them against those other countries. April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in, and whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth. Whatever they tax us, we will tax them.
For decades, America has played fair in trade, while others like Canada and the EU have imposed heavy tariffs. Trump's tariffs aim to rebalance that. So even critics like UAW President Shawn Fain, who campaigned against Trump, support his tariffs to bring manufacturing back to the United States. But here's the titanic challenge. Many of the politicians we elected, along with the managerial class, built a government-centered economy. Trump's Treasury pick, Scott Bessent, told Larry Kudlow on Fox Business, 25% of GDP flows through D.C., where bureaucrats skim their unfair share. The heart of Trump's economic policies aligns with biblical principles of stewardship and justice. Proverbs 20:10 teaches that dishonest scales are an abomination to the Lord, and James 5:4 warns against withholding wages and economic injustice. Essentially, he's condemning both private and governmental systems that exploit the working class. So, you tell me, leave a comment below. Are Trump's economic policies promoting good stewardship by challenging corruption and systemic injustice? Immigration was a flashpoint until about 4 weeks into Trump's presidency.
The media and our friends in the Democrat Party kept saying we needed new legislation, we must have legislation to secure the border. But it turned out that all we really needed was a new president.
Biden and Harris claimed a secure border. Mayorkas swore to it under oath, while CBP counts 10 million illegal crossings from 2021 to 2024. Their fix was a bill locking in 5,000 daily entries. That's $150 billion yearly in taxpayer cost and a turbocharged human trafficking. 1.2 million victims, including kids. And census data shows that 70% of illegal immigrants live in poverty, dependent on welfare. Isaiah 10:1-2 condemns unjust laws and oppression. Cheap labor and free votes should never come at the cost of human dignity and the exploitation of vulnerable individuals. Shouldn't Christians support policies that protect the poor, the marginalized, and the oppressed? Finally, let's look at Trump's push for government reform.
For nearly 100 years, the federal bureaucracy has grown until it has crushed our freedoms, ballooned our deficits, and held back America's potential. Meanwhile, we have hundreds of thousands of federal workers who have not been showing up to work. My administration will reclaim power from this unaccountable bureaucracy, and we will restore true democracy to America again. Because we are draining the swamp. It's very simple. And the days of rule by unelected bureaucrats are over.
Our debt has hit $36 trillion with no accountability in sight. A private company with books that upside down would have been forced into bankruptcy a long time ago. Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, well, they're trying to clean up those balance sheets. The bureaucrats are furious, apparently clueless to the fact that they decry the unelected oversight while defending their own unelected fiefdoms. Democrats admit the government is bloated, but cling to it. The Trump DOGE mission is righteous, but his methods are chaos. Really? Lee Zeldin's EPA uncovered $20 billion parked at Citibank, rushed out by Biden's team pre-Trump to 8 NGOs, some formed just days before the inauguration to dodge scrutiny. Micah 3:11 tells us that God despises crooked rulers who ignore accountability. The Trump administration's effort to root out corruption and curb government spending align with God's demand for accountability and leadership. Shouldn't we be supporting efforts to bring financial transparency and expose corruption? So now let's talk about God's perspective on the good, the bad, and the ugly of human government. Does Trump have a mandate from God? For that, let's take a quick dive into the history of Israel's kings. The first 3 kings, they're a mixed bag. Saul won the popular vote, only to be rejected by God for his disobedience. David was God's pick. He took down a giant, only to fall for adultery, murder, and bad parenting. Yet his repentance turned him into a man after God's heart. Solomon, wise and devoted. until idolatry and harem led to a split kingdom. After that, 39 kings led Israel and Judah. Only 7 did right in God's eyes. Daniel 2:21 states, "He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding." Flawed or not, God appoints and sometimes allows rulers. Sadly, few align with his righteousness. Considering all this, I stand corrected. Does Trump have a mandate from God? Isn't the question. The right question is, will he follow through on the mandate God has given him? You may not agree with everything that I've covered so far. Comment below. Tell me what you do think. But one thing I think you will agree with me is that God calls leaders to justice, accountability, and stewardship. Whether or not we agree with every decision Trump makes, on these issues, his agenda does appear aligned with divine principles, which reminds me of 1 Timothy 2, verses 1 through 2, where Paul challenges us to pray for all the people, including kings and those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in all godliness and holiness. And man, that might leave us with one more question to wrestle with. What if the pursuit of a new golden age has less to do with the president and more to do with how we, the people, rise to the opportunity? I'm Brian Tuttamore. That's today's Faith Check News. Remember, think right to live free.